Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to season 2 of the Profit Power Hour presented by Profit Coach. So glad you're joining us today for episode number 7, the secret to exiting without selling, building your leadership team. So glad to have you here today and super grateful to have my friend and Steve, you've been mentoring me for like 15 years now. So longtime mentor, Steve Riddell. And without a doubt, the most influential person in my business life and outside of business, Steve, you've invested so much in me. So I'm really thankful. And folks, we're grateful to have you here as well. And as we get started today, we always love to just hear where everybody is tuning in from. And so if you can jump in, make sure that you're chatting everyone in the chat channel. Select the everyone option. Tell us where you're tuning in from and what's one fun thing you're going to do this summer. All right, you guys, I know it's crazy time for you, leasing season, but hopefully you're having some fun this summer. So where are you tuning in from? Jump into chat and one fun thing you're going to do this summer. I know you guys are there. Jump into chat. Let's fire up the chat discussion as we get started. Amy, Dallas, Texas, I'm going to try not to melt and spend as much time in the pool as possible. Way to go, Amy. Joy, oh, backpacking in the Sawtooth Mountains. Joy, my worst backpacking experience is in Idaho, maybe not too far from the Sawtooth Mountains. I love backpacking, but we almost got killed on this Idaho backpacking trip. Another story for another day. Steve Riddell from Kansas City, trying not to melt from the heat. The beach, of course. Wow. You guys are having way too much fun. Well, I appreciate you joining us today. If you're sipping a pina colada on the beach, I'm especially appreciative that you take the time to join us today. All right. Joining me again is executive mentor, advisor, investor, business coach, Steve Riddell. And Steve has invested so much in the work that we've done here at Profit Coach. So if you've benefited from that at all, Steve has been a major part of making that possible. And he's also really invested in the property management industry, specifically in the last couple of years. And so I'm so excited to dive into this concept of building a leadership team with Steve today. Well, you know me, author of the NARPM Accounting Standards, CEO at Profit Coach. We help property managers expand their entrepreneurial freedom by building highly profitable, self-managing companies. I'm just going to park on that for a moment today because that's really at the essence of why we're talking about today's topic. There's so many different levers you can push and pull from a financial performance perspective, but at the end of the day, we want to help property managers expand entrepreneurial freedom, not just by being profitable, but also by being self-managing. How do you do that? That's what we're talking about today. And just a little bit about me, dad and husband to Megan, dad to 3 beautiful kids, and hopefully before we meet again for our next Profit Power Hour in August, number 4 will be in this picture. All right, so mom is due on August 9th, and we're excited about that. Okay, if you have questions, we really want to make this interactive today, so please drop them in the Q&A box so that we can interact with those questions as we go along here. Love to just integrate those into the discussion. The secret to exiting without selling, building your leadership team, is the focus for today's topic. But as always, our desire is to help you have a mindset shift and a transformation of thinking where you go from operating in fog to financial clarity, from gut-based decision-making to predictable forecasting, and ultimately from mediocrity to benchmark success. That's the goal for today. So are you ready? Let's get the action going. We're going to start with a poll today, and this is really going to set the stage for the conversation that we're going to have today. And this is really a business health checkup of sorts. And so I'm going to launch the poll and just sort of talk through this with you. There's about 4 questions in this poll, and it might take a moment of reflection. And I hope you actually just get some value out of taking time to think through these questions as we get started here. Number 1, what percentage of your team are A players? And you can answer all 4 of these questions at once. Number 2, How long would your business last without you if you left today? And number three, on average, what percentage of company rocks or goals are completed each quarter? And number four, what is your confidence level in hitting 100% of your goals and objectives for this year? So take some time to think about those. Steve, I want to pop one question at you as we get started. And you know what? Never mind. We're going to talk about A players a little bit. We'll define what an A player is in a bit.
Right.
But go ahead and jump into that poll. Give us your feedback. While you're giving us feedback, why are we talking about what we're talking about today? We're halfway through the year. And if you follow the progression of what we've talked about, we've really walked through every key aspect of financial performance in the first 6 months of this year. We've talked about how a major shift has occurred in PM financial performance. And how the game of profit is changing. There's a profitability shift from 2017 up to today. Companies are getting more profitable in this industry. Why? Because they're optimizing the game of labor and dialing in their labor efficiency. They're optimizing in the game of pricing, dialing in their revenue per unit, hitting a whopping $317 of revenue per unit. They're dialing in their game of growth, achieving an optimized unit acquisition cost of $769 per new unit. The game of experience, they're bringing down churn from 12% in 2018 to 10% in 2022. And we even talked about the game of maintenance. But as we summarize all of this, the question for us is, what does all of this mean to you? And it's one thing to pull a lever here and pull a lever there and get a little bit more profit. But what Profit Coach is all about is fueling entrepreneurial freedom from a holistic, big picture perspective. And that looks like building highly profitable, self-managing companies. And so when we do planning, we ask ourselves, how can we make the biggest impact in fueling entrepreneurial freedom for our clients? And we really believe that today's topic is at the essence of that. And one way I like to think about this is helping you as property managers achieve the final frontier of entrepreneurship. Most entrepreneurs never get to where I'm about to share with you. Most of us, we spend our life getting a business off the ground, getting market penetration. If we're really good, we master and operationalize sales and marketing, and we get some scale. But I've seen very, very, very few property managers master the final frontier of entrepreneurship, which is where I think the gold is. And that is getting to the point where you have the ability to exit without selling. Now, there's nothing against selling, all right? We're talking next month. Our next Profit Power Hour sneak preview is called The Great Acquisitions Debate. And we're going to have a webinar with 5 of the major acquirers in this industry, okay? I have nothing against selling, but what I have something against is selling by compulsion because you haven't built a business that can run without you. The final frontier of entrepreneurship is the ability to exit without selling. I hope that resonates with you. And this ties into our vision for community-driven finance, where everyone in your team is playing the game, not just you, but everyone, and at a minimum, your leadership team. And everybody's playing in community, where it's not just you engaged in the property management community, but your team is engaged in the community and bringing best practices from the community to your business. And everybody is operating with clarity from a scoreboard. So that's what we're talking about today, the secret to exiting without selling, building your leadership team. Steve, thank you so much for jumping into this conversation to talk about what exactly is a leadership team, why do you need one, does every business need one, what does it look like to successfully deploy a leadership team, what are the characteristics, functions, and mindsets of an effective leadership team, and what does it really look like to exit without selling? I hope folks are intrigued. We're going to go to the poll, Steve, and
Okay.
let's get some feedback on this. Can you see the results of the poll?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, number 1, what percentage of your team are A players? It looks like for most people, it's somewhere between 26 and 50%. It looks like people that have 76 to 100% of their team as A players, it's only about 28% of the group here. So honestly, it looks like the majority of people, have about a 50-50 split in terms of the number of their team members as A players. Steve, I think this is one question you put to me a while ago. Why is this important?
Well, in my work with a lot of large organizations, I have the good fortune of working with some major companies, and both small and large. And it doesn't really matter the size, but your ability to be able to grow rapidly or develop long-term sustainable growth within any company is really geared around the people you have at the leadership team level. When I think of Blinds.com, I think of Jay Steinfeld, who was the guy who started it. But one of the things he did extremely well was he gathered a group of people around him. And by hiring the right people, we were able to grow that company from a 17% conversion rate to 65% conversion rate. We went from 18 million to 250 million in a 4-year period of time. Strictly
That's scale.
Yeah, that's scale. But that's strictly geared around the whole idea of you've got to have people in those key positions who really understand what it is they're required to do, they're tasked to do, and they have the ability to be able to execute.
And Steve, I think one of the reasons that this is a telling question in terms of a business health checkup is not just in terms of like, what is the health of your business, but also the function of your leadership team is to make one of the functions is to make sure that the growth of the team is happening at all levels, such that you have these A players at all levels. And if that's not the case in the business, don't necessarily just take that as a reflection on you or any one person, but we want to put that responsibility on the leadership team.
Absolutely. The leadership team in most property management groups are absolutely entrenched with firefighting. They're in a firefighting mode almost 100% of the time. And that is a clear indication that the company's in danger and jeopardy, because who's going to work on the forward process of growth when everybody's in firefighting mode? And I think this is a real problem, especially within the property management world.
Yeah, firefighting and process. Number two, how long would your business last without you if you left today? It looks like we've got 63% of people saying you could measure in weeks or months. 14% say indefinitely. 23% say years. We want to get the majority of the group on this call in those last two buckets. Number three, on average, what percentage of company ROCs goals are completed each quarter? That's a pretty even split across all the brackets, but only 23% are hitting above 76%. Steve, thoughts on this? I think you might have one or two.
Well,
let me just reframe that. Let me reframe that. I've never seen it. 70. That means 77% of companies on this call are hitting less than 76%.
Well, this is an industry that has adopted this whole idea of ROCs. I've never seen an industry that has coalesced around a certain terminology that everyone seems to use, and yeah, I think the most of them misunderstand it. Let me just go on record by saying ROCs are not projects. If you're treating ROCs as projects, you err. And almost all my work with property management companies, they have tasks, and then they have these ROCs that they view as projects, which really become tasks on top of tasks. And it's no wonder why people aren't completing them. ROCs come from the whole concept of ROCs.
Steve, I'm going to pause you there because you're stealing your own thunder. We're going to get to
okay. We're going to get okay. Good.
Okay. All right, but that was a good teaser. Number four, what is your confidence level on hitting 100% of your goals and objectives for the year? Again, interestingly, the distribution here between ROCs, which is to your point, Steve, and confidence around annual objectives is very tight. 23% of people say they're going to get 76 to 100% of their ROCs. Those are the same, probably 23% of people that are saying they're going to hit their annual objectives.
That's right.
You don't hit your ROCs, you don't hit your annual objectives. And by the way, no judgment here. I've been right there. This is still an opportunity for us. All right, so let's dive in. And thank you, folks, for the feedback. And let's keep the questions coming in. If you have questions or comments, light it up in chat. We appreciate that. I like calling people out as well. So, Steve, spend just a couple of minutes on these first two questions here. What exactly is a leadership team? And we can answer these together. Why do you need one? Does everybody need one?
Well, I mean, you can operate without one if you're a small organization, but as you grow and the business expands, you obviously need a breadth of knowledge and experience that can help execute beyond what you yourself are able to do.
Mhm.
And so, as the business grows, there are certain people in key positions that have to take ownership of certain aspects of the business. Primarily, in the property management world, in pretty much three areas. One would be as you get to the area where you're hiring a lot of people in human resources, then you have your person who's over the whole property manager process, and then maintenance process. And as the business grows, there might be a need for additional ones, but the
Growth
leadership.
as well would be another major
What's
category.
that?
Growth in terms of sales and
Oh,
marketing.
for sure. But the idea behind that is that if you don't have people in some key positions around that you're able to delegate to, it's going to be very difficult to scale. And this is the problem, I think, with most property management companies, is they run out of room to scale. The term where I have spent enough time in it, I've noticed that above 500 doors, once you get above 500 doors, the complexity grows. And most property management companies cannot get beyond 500 doors because of the complexity. And I think largely because of an inability to be able to either attract or develop a leadership team.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts on this that I'd like to add as well would be, to the question of does every business need a leadership team? I think really comes down to the way you view your business and the way you view your own relationship to the business as well. I like to talk about there's two types of property management entrepreneurs. One category, and I'm using verbiage that people on this call use with their clients, property owners, okay? But there's two types of property management entrepreneurs. There's accidental owners, and that is you just fell into property management because you managed your own properties and you started managing properties for other people.
Yep.
That's an accidental owner, okay? People call this accidental landlords, all right, in your space. And then, so there's accidental owners, and then there's intentional investors, okay? And we use both of these terms, right, related to property owners, but they're true for property management business owners as well. And an intentional investor is someone who sees their business as an investment vehicle that has a life of its own separate from them. And to me, if you view your business as an investment vehicle that has a life of its own, that's not directly tied to your hours in the business, then you need a leadership team. If you want to create an annuitized stream of income, a passive income that's actually possible in this business, then a leadership team is absolutely essential. Anything else, Steve, that you would say on these 2 points?
Well, whether you plan to sell or to keep it, I think the leadership team is essential.
Yeah.
If you have a leadership team that's capable of executing, the valuation on the business is going to grow.
Absolutely.
So either way you win, but I just don't see how any organization of any size can get away long term without development of a strong leadership team to guide and to scale. It just isn't going to work.
We're going to unpack this a lot more with our answers to these 2 questions. What does it look like to successfully deploy a leadership team? And then what are the characteristics, functions, and mindsets of an effective leadership team? We're going to dive into this with 5 key practices around building, cultivating, and deploying a leadership team. Number 1, Steve, take it away.
Well, in my work with property management companies, especially ones over 500, let's talk 1,500 plus, I've been involved in looking very strategically at why do these companies get to that level, especially when I look inside, they still have a whole host of issues and problems. 3 things came to mind. 1, you see that they have a set of core values that they have developed over time. And to me, I think if you have not gotten to the point where you have developed a set of core values that guide the way in which the company is supposed to work, I think that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Secondly, that they found a way to define their customer experience to the point where if I went to work for you and you said to me, I want you to deliver XYZ property management experience, and And I'd say, okay, what is it? And you can define it for me to the point where I would know if I delivered it or not. Then I think it permeates throughout the organization. Many people have developed this concept around customer experience, but few ever get to the point where they can define it. I was in front of 500 customer experience
Executives.
at a recent summit that I went to. And I went around the room and asked them, okay, I assume you think a great customer experience is great. They all agreed. And then I went one by one and said, what company do you work for? And let's say they said Chipotle. I said, what's the Chipotle experience? And I went through 10 customer experience executives, chief experience officers, and not one of them could define it to the point where I could get to the point where I could understand it and know what I would need to do to actually execute. So I think this is a real problem. And the companies I've seen that have done this have actually done this in spite of a lot of other issues of growth. So to me, the third one then is really a definition around clear goals. They have set clear goals and objectives and know how to use the process of quarterly ROC planning towards a larger goal, especially if you want to get into BHAGs, which are big, hairy, audacious goals. Then everything needs to line up with that. If you believe, as I do, that Stephen Covey says that everything you do start with the end in mind and work your way back, well, that's a classic example of why ROCs exist, is because we start with the end in mind of where we want to be, and then everything we do has to be consistent with all that. And we say we want one thing, but when it comes to actually delivering on quarterly objectives, very few teams are able to execute.
And we're going to talk about that in some detail here in just a moment. But before we move on, this concept of customer experience, Steve, in my mind, as we've developed this under your guidance at Profit Coach, the Profit Coach experience is to own their outcome, ease of doing business, and extraordinary service. And we've borrowed that largely from you. But for us, the value of that is that along with the core values, define the behaviors that are expected from the organization that we are confident will align with our long-term objectives and our mission. And so that's been really useful for us. And I think for the leadership team, it's critical to have the understanding of, okay, if Danny's not around, if David's not my partner isn't there, what is the experience around which and the core values around which we can make decisions. Steve, you talked about how ROCs are sort of generally accepted concept in this industry. I think it's the same is true of core values, but again, oftentimes I think this results in like a plaque on the wall. What is the function of core values?
Well, I was recently at a company and I asked them, I said, do you have a set of core values? And they said, yes. Now, you have to understand, I'm facing them, and behind them on the wall are their core values. They're printed on the wall. Now, they're facing me, so they can't see them. And I said to them, do you have a set of core values? Yes. Okay, so what are they? And they looked at each other and they were kind of humming and hawing, and they were kind of trying to remember them and so forth. And I invited them to look behind them to actually see what their core values were. Too many companies, I think, go through the rigor of at least identifying them, but then they become a plaque on the wall. They're not inbred in everything you do. So I think when you see these companies grow from 500, let's say, to 1,500 to 2,000 doors, even with all of the complexity exists, what they've been able to do is they've been able to clearly define their customer experience and get that embedded in the organization so that people can can know, did they deliver it or did they not, both internally and externally. Then secondly, they hire to a set of core values and they hold their people accountable to those. So that at least those two things to me seem to be the starting point for being able to scale beyond what seems to be a limited number of doors that people can get by, because they're so mired in process that it's hard to break out. And typically speaking, they're churning a ton of people as well, because they're just, in many cases, hiring the wrong people, and they're allowed to stay because they just don't manage to a set of core values and beliefs around customer experience. Now, the good news is that if you execute on those two things well, what's the outcome of that? What the outcome of that is that you get organic referrals that happen as a result of the things that you do. The things I believe and the people that I hire that hold to those values generally will deliver, if they deliver well on it, will result in organic referrals that happen as a result of the things we do.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that principle there is not lost on anybody. It's hiring people based on core values to exhibit those who do exhibit those behaviors, to execute on the defined, clearly executed customer experience produces organic referrals, which is the flywheel of the business. And so like, if you take away one thing from this conversation today, it would be to get your leadership team to a place where they can carry that out. They can hire people based on the core values and hold their people accountable to delivering the customer experience that's clearly defined in a way that produces organic referrals. If you can do that, you're on your way to managing company.
Accountability is the key.
Yeah,
the companies
to that, Steve.
They just have a problem holding their people accountable to a level of productivity and outcomes that they all said were important. They all said they needed to do, but for some reason they're left unaccountable, and so they think, well, I didn't do it this quarter, so I can throw it off to next. It just doesn't work that way, and in large organizations, you'd be fired for that.
Yeah. Okay. Number one, we talked about defining the North Star, your core values and customer experience. And there's one thing I just want to say on this. Like, how do you know if the core values and customer experience are alive and well in your organization? Certainly, if your people can tell it off the top of their head, that would help. But it's really the Kool-Aid mustache effect, right? You know, people have been drinking Kool-Aid when the mustache starts showing up around their lips. That's what you want to see metaphorically in your organization, where it starts to show up in Slack communication and in interchanges between employees. For us, this really started to take off. We haven't arrived, but if I could give you one way to make this a reality, we have a company call each week on Friday morning so that we can have our global team members a part of the call. And it's a win share, but everybody goes around and shares a personal, professional, or team win. But to kick the meeting off, we have what we call our core value spotlight. And we have 5 core values, and there's 3 aspects to our customer experience. And so we take 1 month to go through each of those core values and aspects of the customer experience, and a different employee will share on that for each week. And so for week 1, it's on think abundantly. For week 2, it's on own the outcome. For week 3, month 1 and month 2 and month 3. So 1 month on each core value or aspect of the customer experience. When you hear your team members pulling up the slide decks and sharing an experience or their understanding of a core value, then you know, like, they're teaching it. They're starting to wear the Kool-Aid mustache, and like, I have to lower the bar on this for our team because they're starting to like do these 10-minute presentations, and it's like, guys, it's not supposed to be that complicated, but it's awesome. All right, so consider a weekly core value customer experience spotlight to get your team wearing the Kool-Aid mustache on this. Number 2.
Let me just briefly say this, and if some of you are having issues or problems with developing them, it's pretty easy to go out and take a look at some of the other ones. Let me give you 4 from Blinds.com. And we developed these over a 4-year period of time. They were modified. They were evolve continuously, experiment without fear, express yourself, and enjoy the ride. And those 4 core values were what we used to build a $250 million a year business that has now turned into a $3 billion business from the time that Home Depot bought us to now. So it can start small. It doesn't matter, but you've got to spend some time really understanding what is it that you want your people to believe and how do you want them to act. And that's what core values do.
All right. Number 2, retain and recruit top talent, attract and hire talented individuals with the right skills and cultural fit for leadership roles. So we're specifically talking about the leadership team and also what the leadership team does. So Steve, talk to us a little bit about this one.
Well, I think everybody is, has leaders within a company, whether they wear the title or not. Mm-hmm. And I think the best avenue for most organizations is actually to hire from within, to develop your leadership team along with the rest of the organization. If you're not doing that, then you're actually forced to go out and get talent. And I think there are times when it's appropriate to do that, which is I don't have the talent within, or I don't have the experience within, therefore I need to bring in some additional people. That's how I got introduced to Blinds.com. I came in from the outside as a consultant. They needed a person who had sales knowledge, call center knowledge, and so forth, and they brought me in to do that. And I actually worked for them as a consultant before I actually worked full time. But to me, if you're going to hire people, they need to help the organization rather than be a drain on the organization. I'm going to ask all of you one question. I want you to just to be honest with yourself. And that is, are there people right now in any seat on the bus in your organization that absolutely should not be there? And they drain the organization by the fact that they exist. And if the answer is yes, then the obvious question is, why do you want to continue doing that? And I hear all sorts of excuses. Well, but this person manages a book of business, and if I got rid of them, what would I do? And it would cause harm to the organization. And I'm just telling you, I've taken a hard line in the sand that says I'm not going to be hostage to anyone. I can't be taken hostage. And if you've got employees that are holding you hostage by the fact that they don't do what they're supposed to do, they don't work like they're supposed to work, they drain the organization, but because of the job they have, they're allowed to stay, I just think that's a tragedy for growth. And it's going to inhibit the growth along the way. So to me, as you think about a development of a leadership team, it's that team that is going to help you advance and understand what scale looks like. And instead of just bringing in people to fight fires that happen all the time, there's got to be a measure of firefighting, but forward growth. And to me, you need to hire and train people accordingly. But the accountability factor to me is the key around a great leader. Do they not just know what to do, but can they hold their people accountable for actually doing the roles and the jobs that they have been hired to do? And
we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Then they need to be removed.
Yeah.
That's hard.
It is hard, Steve. Just a question on the screen here. How do you know if you're being held hostage?
When you say you can't get rid of somebody because something bad might happen.
Okay.
Yeah. This property manager has a book of business of 250 doors. I have nobody to take on those doors. Look, I know it'd be difficult, and I've faced it many times. Sometimes I just had to get out and manage them while I'm getting the right person in. Sometimes that's required. But the reality of it is there are always answers on how you solve an issue that aren't geared around a person who can't perform. And by the way, the longer they're there, the more it costs you money.
Steve, what would be some
things you're not supposed to do?
What would be some top characteristics of what's required to be on a leadership team? I think oftentimes what happens in organizations that I've observed is there's a really great player. And it's like, this person does really good at property management, and they're really good at making sure property management gets done. And oftentimes these people are sort of they have the ability to juggle 17 balls, and they can sort of answer everybody's questions and be there for everybody. But you have to ask yourself, are they just a great solo contributor that's really good at being the help desk for their team, or are they actually a leader? And the difference there, I think, is significant when it comes to whether or not people who are good performers can actually be on a leadership team. So again, what are some of the top characteristics of
so I used to notice that some of the best salespeople often made the worst managers. Mm-hmm. And I got a theory about that. I think everyone's born with a set of intuitive skill sets. And most people who are great salespeople have an intuition about it that just causes them to be good. They know that they know that what they do works, but oftentimes they have no foundational understanding about why certain things work. And so when they encounter people who don't have an intuition about it, they often treat them like they're stupid, like you don't know, you should ask questions. And they because it comes so natural to them. I think the thing that most of your listeners need to understand is that if you have a luxury of time, like you can take time to develop people, then you might want to take somebody who has mastered some skill sets and develop them along the chain as a leader. And there are times to do that. But if your time is getting pressed, if you don't have a lot of time and you're trying to hit certain goals and objectives, then it's not time to try to develop a nice person or somebody who does a reasonably good job, but is not a leader of people into that position. So the things I would look for are people who have a real good understanding about foundational aspects of growth. If you think about what's needed, there are several things. One, that as you look at people, do they establish process, or do they think about things in a way that uses scale as a determining factor of what to do? It's one thing for us to develop a process that for something that exists today, but what about next year? And if we don't think about things in the future, what begins to happen is we get stymied along the way. We develop this stuff, then we got to go back and rebuild it again and again. I think you've got to make sure that as you do certain things, that you have scale kind of in the forefront of everything that you do. I think you have to have people who really understand the ideas around the fact that if skill goes up, performance goes up. If skill goes up, problems come down. So they're naturally inclined to help people develop their skill levels. That usually comes through a coaching approach. If they're natural coaches, they're helping people develop skill, then what happens is you see a natural inclination towards growth. If all they are process managers, you cannot process manage an organization to any level of growth. And I do believe that's why at 500 doors, most companies max out, is because they process managed the business to the point where you can't do that anymore. And there's always that point where you can't get further if you don't become better at things than that go beyond process. So to me, these are people that are going to help you through the thought process. They add value in the thought process to actually encourage growth in a number of ways. And they have a background in helping to scale companies in a way that most organizations or most people don't have.
Yeah, that's excellent. And also, as you mentioned earlier, willingness to hold people accountable. We're going to talk about that. Steve, a couple of questions have come in here. First from Todd. Who should be on the leadership team? What types of roles? And what is the maximum number of members for productivity?
Well, I hate to give a number because, 3 people can sometimes do something, more than 8. But if 8 people are really contributors and they really have good thought process, you can make a lot of headway with people. So it's not a number thing. But I think in the property management world, what I generally tend to encourage people towards are these. Owners, if there's 1, 2, or 3, and by the way, if there's an owner that doesn't contribute or doesn't have talent, probably should not be in those leadership team meetings very often because they get too highly emotional in those meetings. They really struggle in some of those areas. So if you've got an owner that is inhibiting growth, then you need to exclude them from the meetings. But generally speaking, it's a CEO. You've got somebody over that is over marketing, advertising, whatever. You've got the head of property management. You've got the head of maintenance, and then you've got somebody with IT capabilities that can, whether that's a chief IT officer or whether it's just your main person you go to for IT related projects. But those are
and then HR perhaps.
And well, I mean, most companies aren't really.
Yeah. Okay.
Scaled for HR, but if HR, it depends.
Yeah.
There are HR people who are really, really good. And if they're really, really good, have them in those meetings. If they're not good and they're not contributing, don't have them in the meetings.
All right,
Because
that's helpful.
they will inhibit growth if they're not really good at what they do.
Next question, it's tied to what we've got going here. Actually, follow-up question. What about someone related to finance, Steve?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was the other one, finance
Yeah.
related. But again, you know, the requirements of a finance person isn't to sit there and listen. Nobody in those meetings should be there to listen. They should be active contributors. And so I really do think that you have to look at your leaders and separate them into two places. Anybody who comes to a meeting and doesn't contribute probably should not be in that meeting. These are meetings that really form the strategy and the execution around what a group should be and do. And if they're not helping in that, then they're just going to be a distraction to what the team's trying to accomplish.
Quick response on this question. Obviously, all leadership team members should be A players. Should all non-leadership people be A players throughout the entire organization?
Well, it depends on how you define an A player. You know, I think there is a reasonably good role for soldiers. You know, people who just show up, they do their job, they do it well, but let's not rely on those people to take on further roles, because that's not what they desire to do. But I think when you really think about, you know, having A players, the greater propensity of people who actually do their task, do it well, and move the company forward in its objectives would be the kind of people you would want. And I sometimes think we make too big of a thing about A, B, and C. C players are people that can be great performers. You know, I had a person who was probably number one salesperson, but she just couldn't get to work on time. How would you classify that? Would that be an A player or a C player? In my view, that's a C player. And I told her, I said, if you so much as come in 1 minute late tomorrow, I will fire you. I had to correct behavior in some areas. And she said, well, you wouldn't. I said, yeah, try me. Just if you come in 1 second, just turn around and go back, because you don't have a job here anymore. I mean, there's just some immaturities that have to be removed from the team. And I think this is all a maturity aspect. You want to begin to develop people that have a mature outcome and mature attitude and a mature work ethic. And if they do, then you can add pieces that they don't have, and it becomes easy to do it. But obviously, in the leadership role, you really want to have people who know how to think and how to execute against a set of objectives that are before them. And if 75% of you said you're not hitting your rocks, I think that's just a tragedy. Why go through the rock planning process to begin with if 75% of you aren't going to hit them anyway? I think that's a come to Jesus moment that you need to go back and look at and ask yourself, is that really how you want your company defined? And by the way,
that's a great segue, because we're right there. So let's get into, for just a couple of minutes, because I want to talk about accountability and coaching for scale. But for a couple of minutes, let's talk a little bit about this, you know, the way that rocks are often mishandled and the right way to do it.
Yeah. So in my work with property management companies, most of them have developed rocks. Rocks come from the whole idea of rocks, you know, rock, pebble, sand, water. The idea behind a rock is and by the way, not all rocks are created equal. And so the idea would be to develop rocks that comprise the biggest aspects of what it's going to take for you to hit your quarterly and annual objectives towards your big goal 3, 5, or 10 years out. They're not projects. And to me, if you treat them as projects, then too many things get in the way. But I think it's all in the way in which you go through the process of rock planning. So with the clients that I have, I take them through a quarterly planning process, which is all geared around at the very beginning of the year. We plan out what we're going to do. Then quarter by quarter, we lay it out and say, okay, these are the things that are absolutely necessary in order to be able to hit our end year results. the things that have to be done first generally will come in the first quarter. You don't want to wait till the last quarter. And by the way, think about your business. It's a monthly annuitized income driven business. If you attack it early in the year, you have 12 months of income that come as a result of what you do. If you wait till the end of the year, you've only got 3 months because it didn't have an effect. So the things that have the greatest effect upon forward momentum need to be done at the first of the year towards an objective that you have. So rocks are simply what are the big items that absolutely need to be done in order to advance us to the end year objective. And if you miss a rock in the first quarter, you can't catch up. And you need to think about this. Forward momentum happens as a result of completion of these things. If you say it's important, if you go through the time to develop these rocks, then why would you not hold your people accountable to achievement of it? Now, but understand that once rocks are set, it's not like a one and done, and then we all go away happy and wait till the end of the quarter to hurry and get it done. So the process I take people through is this: you set your rocks. Then the first week after you set your rocks, you have to write a description of what that rock is. I can't tell you the number of meetings I've set in and said, okay, what are the rocks? And somebody goes, well, I don't understand what that rock is. First, you have to define it to the point where anybody could understand what it is. And then we all agree on that. And then there's a story that is created underneath the rock that talks about what it is and how are we going to know that it's done. Too many rocks are so ambiguous that nobody would know if they were done or not. So they're not trackable, and they're not, nobody would know if you achieved it. So they've got to be very specific around date and outcome. And that's generally all accomplished within the first week, along with a set of milestones that need to be done in order to be able to hit that end quarter. So that anywhere along the way, a CEO or somebody who's looking at all the rocks would have a general idea about whether this rock is on track or not. I see too many meetings where people come in and they say, okay, is this on track? Yeah, it's on track. How many times have you all heard this? My rocks are on track, and then you get to the end of the quarter and nobody knows what happened. How is that possible? And then you go bang yourself head against the wall, and then we repeat the process again next quarter. That's largely why companies have a hard time with getting rocks done. So I would say you've got to get a really good process developed around what rocks are. Rocks are what's going to advance us towards our goal, the biggest thing that we need to be doing. But it's not, if I'm assigned a rock, it's not for me to do. It's for me to make sure it gets accomplished within the team or the company as a result. I'm supposed to marshal my resources. I see too many leaders go off with the rocks, and it's all up to them. Why would we do that? In fact, the best idea is to make sure that you're not the one doing it, and we get the organization rallied around the biggest things that they should be doing. And if you set up the process well, then you set yourself up for a weekly accountability towards those rocks, and everybody understands what the rock is, and you have a higher than likely chance of completing it.
And the critical point there, Steve, around rocks are not projects is if we view them as projects, then we'll much more likely take a passe approach to them getting done. If we view them as what they are, those mission critical objectives towards the annual mission critical items toward the annual objective, then our importance, this importance that we put on them increases, as well as, to our next point, the level of accountability that we're willing to put in place. So Steve.
But understanding that all the things we do in a year also have the BHAG in mind.
Yeah.
So if we're sitting at 1,500 doors and we say we're going to be at 10,000 doors in the next 10 years, all right, then we need to be looking at that year and saying, not did we get this stuff done for this year, but how is this helping us set ourselves up for the kind of growth that we want in the future? If we're not doing that, then we're going to be chasing our tail.
Let's as we start to wrap up here, let's talk about accountability. You've alluded this to um, a couple of times, but such an important part of a healthy organization, something that I know is a growth area for us and me personally. Steve, talk about this in relationship to a leadership team functioning
Well,
effectively.
I come at this from probably a different perspective than most, but I have worked at senior levels of large organizations. And when I took on those roles, for example, and when I took on the role at Compaq years ago, I knew that if I didn't do $1 billion in sales in our first year, I would no longer have a job. So I think all of you need to be thinking about that yourself and have that mindset that if you don't hit your goals and objectives you set, irrespective of whether you be fired, you need to act as though you would, because it changes the way you think. If I think I've got all this time, then nothing gets happened. So for me, it's always been that kind of mindset that I've had, in that I've got certain amount of time and stuff that I have to be done. And I've had roles where if I didn't get it done, I was going to be fired. So what I tend to do is to look for people that are going to help me accomplish that. And then as I manage people, I've got to manage them to an accountability standard that if we take the time to set goals and to develop rocks and all the things that go along with the leadership process, then it makes zero sense to me not to hold people accountable for the completion. Now, it isn't like I wait till the end of the quarter to figure it out. Along the way, you have to have meetings with people to determine whether they are on track for it or not. Remember, I'm the guy that would lose my job. Everybody else will be fine. I'm not going to wait till the end of the year and go, oops, didn't hit it. I'm going to be meeting with people to make sure these things are on track, because I want to have a predictability mindset. And I think all of you need to think about this. I like predictable outcomes. I like predictable thinking, which is I'm going to operate in a way that predictably I know something's good is going to happen. And if you don't have predictability, I think you're sitting around wishing and hoping and that things are going to get done. And generally speaking, people will let us down without some level of accountability. So I'm real high on setting goals and standards of operation and core values by which we operate, and then holding people accountable to the delivery of that. And what I have seen is in the organizations that I've run and managed that we've had huge percentage growth year over year. And when that occurs, you can generally call it a best practice. So to me, it's a best practice.
Love it, Steve. Let's wrap up with this final point. To me, this is one of the most exciting aspects of cultivating a leadership team. It's something that we're experiencing here at Profit Coach, and that is having a leadership team that's making decisions on their own with scale in mind. Why is this important, and how do you coach your leadership team to this perhaps preeminent practice of leadership?
Yeah. Well, early on at Blinds.com, if you've ever been in Houston or lived in Houston, you understand that hurricanes happen in Houston. You never know when, you never know what's going to happen. But after a year of being there and working through a couple of minor floods and so forth, I had to get to a level of thinking about disaster planning. Like we were getting to a point where we could not afford to be out of business. We're an internet-driven business. If a hurricane happened in Houston and everything's in Houston, that's a problem. But when I looked and surveyed our team, what I noticed was everybody was on a desktop machine. And there was no way that you could scatter and still be in business with people on desktop machines. Can you imagine lugging a desktop home? It just didn't work that way. And so we made the decision that we didn't know when a hurricane was going to happen, but what was going to happen. And we made a decision to have everybody on laptops. So we would have flexibility for disaster. If a impending disaster was coming, we could all scatter. And we could go rent a hotel north of the city if we had to and still remain in business. And so and by the way, right after we did that, we had 3 of the worst hurricanes that ever happened. And it would have cratered our business for months and months and months. It would have been terrible. So you have to get ahead of the business and do some work now in order to be ready, so that when it happens, you're not running after yourself trying to catch up. When I went to better.com, we were hiring 1,500 people a quarter as mortgage specialists. Can you imagine that? Having to hire, train, and onboard 1,500 people a quarter. There's just no possible way to do that if you didn't already have in mind the process you would go through. And so to me, as you think about growth, I would look 2 to 3 years out and say, okay, based on what we know today, here's where we expect to be, so that everything we develop and every process we have, we either go back and rework it so that we can get ahead of the growth. For example, if 300 units just popped out of the sky on you, would that be easy for you to deal with, or would it crater your business? And you could
see that's a coaching question.
Yeah.
That's a coaching question, not just for the CEO to answer from you, but for the CEO to ask their leadership team.
Absolutely. Would we have to say no? We couldn't do it? And these things typically happen. So we're ill prepared to do that. What if we had to hire 15 people all at one time? What would happen? You see, we tend to be behind the hiring process anyway. We wait till a position happens in order to go get one. I'm of the always be hiring mindset. I'm going to always talk to people. And if I find somebody who's better at things than other people that are being a drag on the team, man, I'm going to continue to replace people and move people into positions for growth. So the whole idea of a growth mindset is around how we view scale. And can we develop some scalability into the things that we're already working on, so that if we doubled our sales next year, it wouldn't be a big lift for the company. And the companies I see that are in that 1,500 to 2,000 unit growth, still with all the issues, have crossed over to a level of planning around scale that seems to work. And to me, I've got one company I'm dealing with right now, 20% year over year growth in the property management group, and they still have a host of issues they're dealing with. But they have done a very good job around how they deal with rocks, how they dealt with people, and it's been a slugfest for a year getting the right people in leadership roles. But because of the hard work there, we are now set up for a 20% year over year growth. And I think any of you would probably aspire to want to do that.
Awesome, Steve. We're going to talk about, as we wrap up here in 1 second, what does it look like to exit well without selling, and just kind of put a bow on this topic of what's in it for you. Yeah. But before we do that, I want to ask you this question. Can you exit without selling? Are you positioned to do that? If you don't know, I'd like to invite you to hop on a call with our coaching team. We coach on finance, we coach on leadership, developing leadership teams. And I want to invite you to schedule an exit readiness review call. Okay. Are you ready to exit? Do you know? What would that look like? And the goal here would be to help you better understand the health of your current leadership team, get help defining your number one next step for exiting without selling. And then, of course, discover how to optimize your business for maximum value at exit. So what does that look like? You send us your profit and loss statement so we can have an understanding of the financial backdrop of your business, to really understand your ability to exit without selling. And then on this call, we'll help you better understand the health of your leadership team, define that next step for exiting, and then ultimately provide you with 2 to 3 next steps you can take to eliminate financial fog from your business and dramatically improve your bottom line, typically by at least $50,000 each year. So totally free. We'd love to jump on the phone with you. We love engaging these conversations. And if that would be useful, I just want to invite you to just hop in the poll here and just say, yeah, let's schedule it, and we'll reach out to get that scheduled. So yes, let's schedule it, or no, thank you is acceptable as well. All right, so love to have that exit readiness review call with you. As we wrap up next on Wednesday, August 16th at 12 p.m. CT, episode 8 of the 2023 Profit Power Hour. We're going to have a great acquisitions debate. Folks, this is who's who in terms of who's acquiring businesses in this space. Mike Catalano from Pure, John Hirschfeld, CEO of the Home River Group, Matthew Whitaker, CEO of Evernest, Charles Riska, president of Rome, Chuck Hattemer, co-founder and CMO at Poplar. You want to be on this call, folks. This is going to be a jam. All right, Steve,
Wow.
as we wrap up here, we've talked about a lot of things. I want to end here. What does it really look like to exit without selling? It's a lift. It's a big mountain to climb, but why is it worth it?
Well, I think it all depends on how you think about it and what your long-term strategy is. The property management business is an annuitized business to begin with, and it provides an annuitized income stream that if it's run well and you've got a leadership team, it can provide you with a long-term lifetime income if it's done well. But I think you need to think about it like this. Even if at some point in time you want to sell, it doesn't really matter. The valuation of that business is going to be strictly geared to how well that business operates. So if you build a business that operates well, the valuation will be much better to your advantage anyway. But if you don't, then I think you need to be thinking about it from the way most organizations are, larger organizations are geared. They have a chairman of the board, they have a board of directors, they have quarterly meetings that they come in with. They sit down, look at the business, do some business planning, talk with the management team, see they're on board. And so you could become literally a chairman of the board that comes in on a quarterly basis to review the business and how it's tracking towards its quarterly and yearly objectives. And maybe even have, if you've got multiple owners, all of you should be thinking about that long-term in mind. And if you get the right management team in place, you still have input into the business from a directional point of view, but it's not the day-to-day grind that many of you involved in right now. And to me, I would think that this would be something that would be pretty exciting because it could fund your next adventure. I mean, not all of you got into this because you wanted to do it forever. But wouldn't it be nice to have an ongoing income stream while you're funding your next venture? To me, that's a lot more exciting than a one-time sale and done. But if you just don't like the business anymore, then I would highly encourage you to get on a phone call with Danny's team to figure it out. But if long-term income is something you want, that's a great way to achieve.
Awesome, Steve. That was a great wrap. And I'm excited, folks, for you to have a sense of what this long-term opportunity looks like. And specifically, love to jump on that exit readiness review call. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, I just want to say finally what the next objective is. We want to help you guys beat the benchmark, exceed your financial performance goals. Do that with your team. Financial performance is community driven, it's team driven. Get your team, every member of your leadership team on board to contributing to your financial performance. And the next session here on the Profit Power Hour is on August 16th at 12 p.m. Central Time, the Great Acquisitions Debate. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us here today. That was fantastic.
Okay, guys.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the sunshine and whatever that fun thing was that you said you were going to do at the beginning of the call might be the day to do it. All right, take care. Have a great day.